H. pylori, or Helicobacter pylori, also known as the ulcer bacteria, has been misinterpreted by the medical profession, trying to kill it because it may cause gastric ulcers and stomach cancer, and is associated with diabetes. While that's not a small issue, the flip side of this is that the most virulent H. pylori species are also associated with the reduction of strokes and lung cancer, along with asthma, diarrhea, colitis, and intestinal infections. So what do we do with this conflicting information when half the world population has H. pylori?
Yeah, well, see, there's a big difference between things that cause illness and things that are associated with illness. And with Helicobacter pylori, the problem is we know with ulcers and with stomach cancer that H. pylori is very likely to be the cause of it. But in other conditions, it may be a marker. So in a situation that was done at this New York University Medical Center, where they looked at the number of people, or the number of people that had H. pylori, and those that didn't, they found that those that did have H. pylori, and particularly one that was especially virulent, that the number of strokes was 55% lower, and the number of deaths from cancer was 45% lower. And that was a study on 10,000 people over 12 years. So this is a big study.
So what do we do when we don't understand the biochemistry?
I would say we do less rather than more.
Because many times don't the gastroenterologists give people lots of antibiotics when
they do what's called triple therapy. So they're giving 2 antibiotics, clarithromycin and amoxicillin, along with a proton pump inhibitor that blocks oleic acid, and Pepto-Bismol. And that's a lot to do to the gastrointestinal tract. And yes, it may eradicate most of the H. pylori, but it's certainly not going to eradicate all of it. And 50% of all people in the world carry H. pylori, and I'd have to say 100% probably have some traces of it that aren't detectable because it doesn't culture out.
But all those people don't have ulcers.
No, and they don't have stomach cancer, and maybe those people are the ones who are less likely to have strokes and lung cancer.
So rather than to fight this infection, and when somebody has an ulcer or gastric cancer, what about supporting the gut with things?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, once somebody has stomach cancer, it's a bit late, but somebody who has an ulcer and there's H. pylori there, my first approach would not be to use triple therapy. What I would do is I would try to crowd out the H. pylori with probiotics. I'd support it with an amino acid called L-glutamine because it's a metabolic fuel that helps it work better. And I'd also add something like UltraClear Sustain, and there are many products like it, that will feed the gut lots of things to allow it to do its work better.
So in other words,
and maybe some licorice root extract on top of that.
So you're boosting the immunity.
Well, you're boosting immunity to an extent, and you're boosting its ability to heal itself. You know, Albert Schweitzer had it right. What we have to do is get out of the way and let the body do the healing. And that's the same thing here. So this business of H. pylori has to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt because it also does some other interesting things. People who have high levels of H. pylori also have a lower risk of developing asthma or developing some kinds of infectious diarrhea. So it's interesting.
And strokes and lung cancer. So
right. So you have to be careful what you believe. It's good to read things like this because it gives you a broader perspective of how complicated the human body is in its cell biochemistry. And we're looking at the intestinal tract and the microflora in the gut. We've got thousands of species of microbes there and 10 times as many microbes as we have cells in the human body. Going in there with double antibiotics is a risky thing to do because it upsets the whole ecosystem of the gut. And then we have to start again because we've got this tunnel vision that's looking at H. pylori as the cause of all of ulcers and cancer.
And then many times what you can do, like you were saying, is that if you take probiotics, you can crowd out the bad bacteria.
Yes,
and create more of a balance.
It's an easier, simple, more realistic way that's less invasive to get the job done the same way.